You're listening to the Cash Flow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner, your source for investing made easy. Here's Andy Tanner.
Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. It's wonderful to be with you. And we're going to have a great conversation today with Rob Embers. Rob is a cybersecurity specialist, and there's a lot of talk about the amount of data that's collected even legally. And then there's even more about the data that can be collected illegal, and this is rampant. And so both as a investor, as an entrepreneur, and as a consumer, all three important information today. So with that, Rob Embers, welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast, and thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Now, your experience has been working with different companies. You now work independently, and you are a consultant to companies that want to shore up their defenses. Give me a little bit of your background, though, and tell us how you landed in this space.
Right. Well, I started in tech 20 years ago, mainly in the hardware arena. Obviously desktops, laptops, servers, etc. More the back end stuff of what we see today, which is all stuck in big data centers. I think 10 or so years ago, I moved into this consultancy space in cybersecurity and set up a number of sales offices and client relationships around the globe, working with organizations to try and help them figure out the right course of action and some of the activities that they should be looking to undertake to obviously improve their security, the data that they have from the business, but also from their clients, from their consumers. And today I work with organizations on a wider perspective and I guess help them roadmap out the various activities. I mean, cybersecurity is a huge business worth billions. It's extremely confusing because everybody's got the latest, greatest thing. And I think really it's helping people, I guess, see the wood for the trees kind of thing, and not sort of rush off and invest huge amounts of money in the wrong areas, but really take a step back, look what they're trying to protect, look what they're trying to achieve, and then help them figure out the right partners that they should be working with going forward.
We'll work our way into the area of finance, banks, and brokerages, but let's start with just the amount of data that is collected. Let's start with the legal side. Where right now, today, Apple and Facebook came out with some opposing hate mail to each other. Apple's accusing Facebook of collecting data that's not necessary to sell. Facebook fired back and says, well, Apple has such a strong base that they're about profits, not really privacy, and back and forth. What is this new age we live in terms of data? And even if I want to protect myself from having all my data collected and sold legally, is there anything I can do that way?
I think really looking at the services that you subscribe to, looking at the settings of the services. There's obviously a myriad of fine print. And really, I think for me, a lot of this comes down to personal preference. Mm-hmm. I hear a lot about people concerned about their data. I mean, I think ultimately if people are that concerned, then they really need to question whether or not they should be using these applications. Facebook, Apple, Amazon, they've all built very successful businesses around the capture of data and trying to essentially make our lives easier. But by making our lives easier, we forego a certain amount of information. And I think really it comes down to whether or not people are happy to expose that information to those organizations. Obviously, there needs to be strong controls as to what those businesses do with that data to a third party, and I think there's obviously legislation and there's constant reviewing of that legislation to make sure that there's no improprieties with that data. It's a really tough one. There's so much of it out there, and I think nobody truly knows what data exists about themselves in various organizations. European Union implemented GDPR, as did California, a similar version, basically requesting or requiring organizations to be able to advise you the information they have. I think there's certainly a lot stricter and more stringent guidelines about data and data usage in Europe than there is in North America. Yeah, I mean, as I say, I think it comes down to what you're prepared to expose and the benefits of exposing that data.
Let's move a step now into illegal activities, which is really your specialty. Last year we had, I think, one of the most disturbing. Well, we had Marriott, huge breach. We had British Airways, huge breach. We had Equifax, which to me was extremely disturbing. I'm trying to remember the number on Equifax, but I felt like the amount of money that Moody's downgraded them. I think they spent about 1.4 billion, 1.5 billion, somewhere in there, on post-breach costs. And so, think about how devastating that is, a company like Equifax that is in charge of your credit rating, and they're having to spend $1.5 billion on breach. And then finally, the other one that was disturbing, because with coronavirus, Zoom stock has gone through the roof. Zoom has done great. They've kind of taken that, they had, there was GoToMeeting, there's a bunch of, there's Google Hangouts, but Zoom has really been the one people have chosen, and they've had some breaches. Could you talk a little bit about those breaches, and what is, what are they, just hackers having fun? What is a cyber criminal, and what does a cyber criminal want?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's certainly a combination of a more espionage or organizations, hacking groups looking to acquire information, which they later look to monetize. We can come on to that in a second. But there's also, there's also hacking for fun kind of thing, for people to prove that they can. I'm not, in terms of what a hacker looks to achieve is, it's a difficult question because the only hackers I know are all legitimate and honest hackers because that's their job. Right. In terms of the criminal aspect, I think data is valuable. The information that organizations hold on us, be it email, worst case, in the Equifax situation, maybe a social security number. I mean, obviously there's identity fraud, there's acquiring money through false pretenses. These are all areas that people can monetize. There's credit card fraud, of course. It happens on way too frequent a basis that, organizations are compromised and their credit card details are exposed because they've been insecurely managed internally. They've been put on the dark web. People can go ahead and buy them, and that costs businesses millions of dollars a year. I think invariably, my own personal opinion is people are looking to acquire information so they can monetize them. Be it credit cards, social security numbers, passport numbers, general ID, fraud, essentially.
And, I think about things I've done to protect myself. For example, I freeze my credit. So if someone did have my social security number and they tried to open up a new line of credit, they'd be denied because they, hopefully the credit would be frozen. Right. That's a bit of a hassle if you need to unfreeze it and freeze it. You have 3 agencies. We don't know who made them king, but I guess they are. They're in charge of this. But then there's the idea of actual theft of property. Different than stealing a social security number and trying to horse around there, or mess with a stolen credit card. You can go back to the credit card company and say, hey, this was stolen, and hopefully there's some redress there. But when it comes to your, and if I have a thief, they got to, break into a vault somewhere that's in a secure location and steal the gold. And it's going to be very tough for someone to steal real estate, I would imagine. If you have a rental house, there's records that show it's yours. But then we deal with the world of online trading, and that's where we'll turn the balance of our focus. You have an E-Trade account or a Schwab account or an Interactive Brokers account. First of all, let's talk about the secure, how secure those are, and then we'll talk about, or are not, and then we'll talk about what people should look for in a brokerage in terms of security, and if they have any redress on breach and what type of breaches happen. So there's a lot of questions. Let's take one at a time. What's your general opinion of online brokerages? Let's start there.
The ones I've worked with, I think, tend to do a reasonably good job. That's by no means all. It's a really difficult, because obviously on the face of it, the information that you acquire as a consumer looks to be good. Now, I think most individuals are unaware of the kind of things that they should be asking organizations. I think, firstly, if a business that you're working with, a brokerage, and you're using a portal online, if it doesn't have two-factor authentication, I would stop right there just from the off. I think that's a key thing that every kind of online transaction, even your own email, Gmail, or whatever it is you use, you should always be implementing the two-factor authentication. So if that's not there, then, I think that would be a real red flag for me. A lot of these organizations are required by state authorities to undergo what's known in the cybersecurity world as penetration testing, and that really looks at reviewing the website and the interactions that you have as an individual with that website, and looking at the security around it. I think a good question for people to ask is, when did you have a penetration test? Have you resolved the issues that were identified in the test? These are all things that if people start asking and people start doing, we're going to find a lot more secure websites, because ultimately, people try to get websites up and running. They're trying to get businesses going. Security, unfortunately, is often put at the back end or the lower priority, unless, of course, you're working with larger financial institutions who pretty much now mandate it because they don't want the association and indeed don't want the risk of a third-party site being able to compromise information within their systems. So I think really actually taking the time to question and review what organizations are doing is probably a good step in helping people figure out who are the right people to be working with.
Let's talk about things like Wi-Fi. If I decide, let's say I'm sitting in an airport and, crowded, lots of people on their phones, and I decide to use my app to make some trades or make some adjustments or, sell some puts or calls. What is my risk in terms of being hacked by using a cell phone on maybe a Wi-Fi network as opposed to the cellular network if I'm in a hotspot?
For me, hotspots are convenient to maybe download a movie or do some basic, download emails, etc., do some email. I certainly wouldn't be doing any financial transactions on hotspots. I would certainly be waiting to do those in a trusted environment, be it at home, office, or somewhere that you can verify that the information you're transmitting is in a secure fashion. Hotspots are not designed for that. I know there's a convenience, but I would personally be using cellular for that.
Interesting stuff. Let's talk about the future of security. One of the things that has been there's a lot of hubbub about in past years has been things like Bitcoin and Ethereum, cryptocurrency, and Bitcoin works off of blockchain technology. But from what I understand about blockchain technology and what it does, I think cryptocurrency is probably the very beginning of the use of that technology. I thought about some of the voting in, I live, a lot of our listeners are all around the world. About a third of them are outside my home country, the U.S., but they're aware that here in the U.S. they've had some election, dispute, I guess. What about blockchain? How does blockchain and how could blockchain help with transactions in the future? Because I think, man, if we've gone this far with Bitcoin, why are we not using blockchain in all of our financial transactions? If you're going to buy and sell Bitcoin or buy something with Bitcoin, that transaction is recorded, in that blockchain of record. Why aren't stocks traded that way? Is it just too slow? Why aren't we voting that way? What do you feel about blockchain and its future and use in terms of security?
I think like anything, things can be developed securely, things can be developed insecurely. Yes, it's the platform in which cryptocurrencies are traded. Again, I think it's really how these environments are implemented and ensuring that actually things are implemented so with security in mind. So many times people rush to deliver and get something out there and don't consider the security aspect. There's a lot of technology that can help. There's a lot of technology that can have the time of doing something, make something happen instantly or nigh on instantly, and there's no reason why any of these things shouldn't be used. They've just got to be implemented securely. So again, I think it's, there's two ways of doing it. You can rush it, get it out there and hope for the best, or you can actually do it properly, manage it, and ensure that actually what you are delivering and what you are putting there is done securely. I think there's no reason why blockchain can't be used in a greater capacity, providing it's understood what people are trying to achieve by using it, and the necessary risk assessments and thought processes around it are satisfied. And if you can't be satisfied with the level of risk that you're implementing or introducing by using that technology, then ultimately you shouldn't be using it. Blockchain, I'm not an expert on, so I'm obviously, I know about blockchains, but it's in terms of how it's implemented and how it may help things like election. I certainly wouldn't be the best person to comment on that.
Because even they've had their problems. I mean, there's been breaches of security even with blockchain, and also has to do with what country. A lot of Forex brokerages are, you have your U.S. brokerages that people in my home country trade from. But if you decide as a U.S. citizen to trade outside your country, or you're in the U.K. and you're going to trade from a brokerage in Singapore or wherever, that can be difficult for. There's another level of risk there when you go outside of your own country. Yes.
Absolutely.
So interesting stuff.
Yeah, I think, as I say, it's with clients, with organizations, and I think even with individuals, everything comes down to risk. Yeah. And what risk are you happy to undergo? You know what I mean? It's like, if you're taking a position on something, obviously the bigger the position, the higher risk, et cetera, et cetera. The same is with your data. I think if people look at it in that way, the more information I'm putting out there to more parties, I'm increasing the risk of that information being acquired by people that I wouldn't necessarily want it to be acquired by. So, I think if people really step back before exposing lots of information, then, maybe they'll realize that actually everything they are exposing, because they've got everything ticked to say, yeah, that's fine, isn't necessary. It's very interesting. I know how often you download applications, but the amount of unnecessary information applications require when you get them like the iStore, iTunes, or the Google Play Store, they want to read your contacts, they want to look at your pictures, they want to manage your phone calls, and sometimes these applications just have no necessity to do that, Yeah. So I will just say, no, and if it doesn't work, well then clearly I'm not happy, I delete the app. And I think, as opposed to people just saying, well, yeah, they need to manage my phone calls. Well, probably not.
Has the COVID-19 pandemic affected cybersecurity? Have we seen any change, or has there been an impact? So many people working at home, so many people doing things online now. Any impact from COVID?
I think there's certainly been the opportunity to compromise people has arguably increased, because they're working at a home network, and maybe from a different computer, or there's different computers on that network than you would normally have on your corporate network. So yeah, I'm aware that there's been a lot more attacks. I think phishing has actually increased. Getting people to be vigilant and ensuring that what they're clicking on is the right thing. I think from a consumer's perspective, obviously most people are using online shopping now, because obviously going to the stores has a different level of risk. So I think, a word of advice to anybody who's buying things online is to, look at the site, make sure that there's some sort of secure encryption on there by making sure that HTTPS. Again, I've noticed myself there's been a lot more text-based emails with supposed tracking details. I think really it's, if you're buying something online, it's good to read and understand the methods of communication from that vendor, because, in a lot of cases, you won't necessarily receive text messages, and obviously these embedded links within text messages will potentially look to take over your phone or install some sort of malware onto a phone, and ultimately look to get information out of it.
So let's say a person now, we've talked about consumer, we've talked about investor, let's talk about entrepreneur. If someone wanted help, or what recommendations would you make if someone says, look, I'm going to start an online business, I'm going to conduct e-commerce, how can I go about this? What should my concerns be? You mentioned that this is often not the priority that should be. It's often one of those things like, put on your safety belt after the car accident's happened, right? And so what advice would you have to someone saying, look, I've been affected by COVID, maybe I lost my job, I want to start an online business. What do you do? How do you protect yourself that way?
I think you've got to make sure you use one of the more reputable programs. There's a number of businesses out there that will help you devise a website and will help you implement a payment portal into it. I think making sure that you implement the payment portal in full, and making sure that you don't cut any corners on that. Unless your business is actually taking credit card numbers, there's no reason why any business online, in my view, should be taking credit card numbers. There's a bunch of third-party organizations out there, WorldPay, there's just a ton of them. And, those are the kind of organizations you should be looking to handle the transaction. It might be, it's going to cost you a few dollars, but it's going to cost you a lot more dollars if you do it incorrectly and get compromised. So I think making sure that the website you're using is up to date, making sure the CMS, the content management system, is a reputable one and updated. A lot of the compromises that happen are because people don't keep their systems updated. Have a structure, create a structure, and ensure that you follow it on a regular basis, and put some time aside to manage that aspect of your business, because if that's what you're going to do, then you better make sure it's done properly. Otherwise, it's going to come back to bite you at some point.
Let's talk about your business a little bit and what you do. If someone wanted help with this, is there a way they can reach out to you? What size of business do you work with? What are those things? If they wanted to ask you questions or reach out to you, how would they do that?
LinkedIn is a good way to reach out to me. I always respond to people who send me direct messages on there. I think obviously most business people use LinkedIn. Very happy to look and engage with organizations. In terms of business size, it depends really on what they're looking to do. I mean, I think if they're looking for, some basic sort of, this is what I'm thinking of doing in your experience, what should I do? That can be a very small business. I think, I work with 5-man organizations up to, very large organizations. So there's no real restrictions on the information. It's all very scalable. And I think the one thing that's important is understanding each individual's business requirements. And the reason I do what I do now is because I don't have a product or a solution to sell. It's just really helping people figure out and understand. So, that's very scalable depending on the risk and the type of business that they're involved in.
I hope you've enjoyed my discussion with Rob Embers. We've been talking about cybersecurity with so much of our wealth becoming digitized. Money is mostly digital, and your portfolios are digital, your cryptocurrency is digital. So much is out there. Your credit is out there digital. And so this is something to pay attention to. And Rob, we thank you for your time. Any last words?
Good. I enjoyed it. Hopefully there's some interesting information in there. And as I say, I'm happy to have people reach out if they need any clarification.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cashflow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Cashflow Academy podcast with Andy Tanner. For more information on investing made easy, go to thecashflowacademy.com.